Today, we are going to make some grass. No, I'm not in Colorado, so it's not going to be that kind of grass. It's our techniques that are so simple and sensible, your mowers have practically built themselves.
Hello folks, it's Maddog Merv and welcome to today's show. Today we are going to look just briefly at a little trip I took recently back to Virginia, and I had a choice of battlefields to go to, and I decided I wanted to check out the one at Petersburg, which there was a siege towards the end of the Civil War of Petersburg. I'm not going to go over the battle much itself because, well, there's so many other sources that will tell the story a lot better than me. I just want to show you guys the pictures that I took, talk to you a little bit about them, a little bit about what happened, and then there's one other really cool thing that was nearby that I had to visit, so we're going to talk about that as well. So stick with Maddog Merv as we look at my trip to Petersburg, Virginia.
Recently, I had the privilege of being able to speak at the Virginia School Plant Management Association. This is a group of plant managers or building managers, if you will, from school districts all over Virginia. Great organization, and they have an annual conference, and this is the third time I've been invited to speak there. And while I was there, I thought I'm going to go visit a nearby battlefield because I had an extra day that I'd flown in early. So I went over to Petersburg because I've never been there, and it was actually fairly close. Now, the Petersburg Battlefield was part of the Overland Campaign in 1864 that Grant took to put pressure on Richmond, and wound up culminated in the Battle of Cold Harbor in the end of May of 1864. Terrible losses, but Grant decided to move towards Petersburg, and there was a short battle between the 15th and 18th of June, but then it soon turned into a siege, or more appropriately trench warfare, that lasted until April 2nd of 1865. So they were there for a while, and particularly through the winter. Yuck, would not want to do that. So here's one of the other placards there at the museum, and this is kind of a map of the areas where you can visit. On the far right is one I did not go to. The second one to the left, that's where I mainly checked things out, which was the eastern front of the battlefield. I also went to the western front. So here at the visitor center, they have all of these different cannons, different smoothbore. There's some that are rifles. There's some that are mortars that are here in this little area. Great examples from both the Confederacy and the Union side as well. So going inside the museum, very well done. Beautiful cannon sitting right here in the front. But off to the right, you'll notice a picture of this mortar. And they called it, I believe it was called the Dictator. 200 pound shell that thing shot, almost 2 miles. Yeah, what a monster. That landed on Petersburg. So here's kind of a little area where you get the idea of what the battlefield would have looked like without all the green grass and stuff, because it was a battlefield. They had a nice little diorama. Of course, this is right up my alley, this type of thing. And I really got a kick out of looking at this and all of the details that are in this little diorama. It was a great job somebody did. So behind me here is the museum. And what we're going to do is kind of go from there. There's a short little walk. We're going to go to the right, and as I go to the right, here's this little trail that goes off to what's called Battery 5. This was one of the Confederate batteries. It was one of the first taken over by the Union, and you can see here how it kind of had the cannon arranged. Now, this is where the dictator also sat, where we we sent those big siege mortar shells into town. This is battery number 9, just down the road, and it's a great representation of what the trench warfare and the obstacles were that were set up at these areas throughout this battlefield. And there's several different stops along the way, and a lot of cannon. You get a lot of different cannon. Some of them I got some real good pictures of up close, so I can analyze them a little better. Now, I'm headed towards this place called the Crater. The Crater was a battle that took place in July 30th of 1864. And basically what happened is the Confederates had their lines, the Union had their lines, and somebody had a bright idea. And I'm not going to tell you the whole story because I want you to look it up. There's a lot better people out there telling the story. They're telling it better than I can. But here's the gist of it. They get this idea, some Pennsylvania coal miners, to dig this tunnel, little over 500 feet underneath the Confederate lines, and then kind of put a T, so it's kind of a T-shaped tunnel, and it was 20 feet below the Confederate lines. In fact, one of the main batteries there in that area, and they packed it with, I want to say 8,000 pounds of TNT, but I'll have to look that up now. I can't remember the exact amount. Anyway, they pack it in there, and they went to light it off. It didn't kind of didn't go the first time. The fuse, there was a problem with the fuse. It's supposed to go off at 3:30 in the morning. Finally, they got it going, and by 4:45, this big explosion, and we'll kind of show you what happened after that. Here is one of the crates that they use. Would use these crates to carry the dirt out of the mine as they were digging, and there's still one in existence. So this is looking from the crater. This isn't the crater, it's behind me, but this is looking down across the Confederate line, which is the tall weeds right there, looking over to the Union lines and the Union batteries in the far side. So the weeds here in the front, that was representing where the Confederate line was. The kind of a dead tree way off in the distance, there was a building there, Civil War era building, and all that's left now is just the ruins of it. But to the right of that, at the tree line, there was a Union battery, and so they shoot shells back and forth at each other. Now here is the crater. When the explosion went off, about 150 feet long, 50 feet wide, 30 feet deep, crater. So unfortunately for the Federals, they took their time. Well, they didn't really take their time. It took some time for them to get moving and get the troops through this area. They weren't supposed to go down into the crater. They were supposed to go around the crater. But this regiment that made this assault, well, they weren't originally planned to be. They weren't They weren't the ones trained for this. And when they finally got going, the Confederates had already started to recover. Now, this explosion took out a bunch of cannon, almost 300 soldiers killed. Okay, this was a big explosion. But the regiment that did make the assault went down through the crater. This 30-foot crater didn't have ladders to get up the other side. They figured it was a good gun pit. Well, it wound up being just a murder hole. The Confederates came up over the works, shooting down at them, and unfortunately for the Union, it was a slaughter. Due to incompetent leadership, 100% incompetent leadership on the parts of the commanders who were supposed to make this assault. And if they had succeeded, they only had to go, as you can see off in the far distance past the monolith that's there. There's some trees way out there. There's a road out in that area. And all they had to do was get to that road, and they weren't far from Petersburg. So they effectively could have captured Petersburg if this had been successful, but unfortunately it was not. Anyway, for more info, check out the Battle of Petersburg. So I was looking on Google Earth for the next area, which is the Western Front, and I saw this. I know what this is. Do you know what this is? Well, let me tell you what it is and why it's so important to me, but I'm going to go for the 5-mile drive. So we hop back in the car, and you can see just absolutely how beautiful it is and how wooded it is. Now, it wasn't that way during the battle, obviously, but just a beautiful area to be driving through in the fall. And after about almost 5 miles, we come to a place called Fort Fisher. Fort Fisher was the largest earthen fortification on the Petersburg front. It was constructed by the Union Army in the fall of 1864. And this is what it looked like through most of the winter, fall, winter, into the spring of 1865. And you can kind of see on the right-hand side, kind of like an arrow shape, and then there's another one there kind of in the foreground. And this is very typical of what's called a star fort. And star forts were all over the world. It was very popular from the late 1500s through till Civil War times, these star forts. And the reason it has my interest is Nassau in the Bahamas, there is a star fort there. Anyway, pirates and star forts. Yeah, really cool. Many of the fortifications back east, Fort McHenry, just there's so many that are these star forts from this period of time, and some are still around, and there's footprints of others still around, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But so for me, seeing an actual star fort to kind of get the size and all that. True, this was an earthen star fort. This wasn't something that was built way up high, but you can see about how high the walls were on this particular fort. And they put some cannon up there, and anyway, elevate the position and dig a trench in front of it, all that kind of fun stuff. So, to me, seeing a star fort, I could not pass this up. So here is what its final configuration was, and I believe it was 1865. Before the war was over, it was actually turned into this size star, which is really cool for me to be able to see. So we'll finish our little drive. Beautiful drive, by the way. Beautiful area, and we will meander over here to Fort Fisher. Now, it was just west of here on April 2nd of 1865 that the Union Army broke through between this fort, and there was another little fort not too far away that they broke through and finally were able to take Petersburg. But here is the entrance that's on the, I want to say the south side of the fort. And just interesting to be able to see how it's dug, how the battlements are. Of course, some star forts had buildings inside. This one just more or less tents, but it's still really cool to see and see the size of it. For me, this was a big deal. So, speaking of star forts, there's one not too far from me, actually in New Mexico. It is also a Civil War star fort, and this is Fort Union, New Mexico. It's a ways from Albuquerque, but anyway, check this out. Yeah, we're going to talk more about star forts. I want you to please check them out. Check out what information is out there on star forts, and maybe you'll get as excited as me. These are really cool. Anyway, folks, thanks for joining us today. Hopefully I get to New Mexico to see this one soon. Just the remnants of it. Anyway, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon.